Hey everyone, so today I'll be covering another Great League Go Battle League line. In this specific lineup, I actually used a lot in rank 10 right before the new season started. I did this mainly so I could test the lineup against some of the top players, and overall I think it's still pretty relevant in today's meta. So the lineup I'm using is Jirachi, Sableye with Return, and Shadow Machamp. I'll talk a little bit more about my strategy while I'm going through the video, but overall you really do want Return on Sableye, mainly because it can flip a lot of matchups, specifically Azumarill, and for that Shadow Machamp you really want that hard-hitting shadow damage. So the general strategy in this lineup is you want to use Jirachi to take out your opponent's Azumarill and Flyer. And so those are the two of the biggest threats to both Sableye and Machamp, and if you can't catch Azumarill in the lead like this, usually Sableye as a safe swap draws out that Azumarill or draws out that Flyer. So in this situation, it's a winning matchup. You do want to shield because if they land the Hydro Pump, it's going to really flip the matchup completely. But as long as you shield, you can win it in 2 shields or even if they're baiting you with Ice Beams. Alright, so I'm going to bring in Sableye right here, and the big reason behind this is you're pivoting away from your Jirachi so that you potentially could bring in the next Pokemon that's hard for your Machamp to beat. So in this case, Tropius, definitely a very hard counter to Machamp, and so being able to draw it out with Sableye means that now I can match up with my Jirachi, and then I could realign my win condition with Machamp against Stunfisk later on. So of course they're going to bring out their Tropius because Tropius has a better matchup against Sableye than Galarian Stunfisk does, and also they want to use the Stunfisk against Jirachi. So they're kind of forced to swap out in that situation, and at this point you can just straight count down. So obviously in a situation where you're winning lead, it's a little bit easier, but depending on what they have in the back end, definitely can still be a little bit hard even if you win that lead. So a big other weakness to this team is Charmers, but it's usually Charmers are kind of rare, especially in Season 3. So you're not going to see nearly as much of it, and you don't tend to see it as much as you move up a little bit more in the ranks too, just because Charmers tend to be kind of unreliable as consistent Pokemon to win with. Alright, so I do let this Hydro Pump go, and so in this situation it's not great to be in. However, I bring Machamp because I know they can't get to another charge move, and unfortunately there is a Flyer too. But Machamp and Sableye with energy is actually very, very deadly. And so I am going to bring in the Sableye right here, and it's going to do solid against this Munchlax. However, Munchlax is usually a counter to Sableye if you can land the Bulldoze, and they do. And so they're going to take me out right here. And I'm okay with this because this means that now I can farm up a little bit more with my Machamp, and then one Rock Slide will actually almost one-shot Altaria. So it's actually pretty strong, and this is why you really want Shadow Machamp. Regular Machamp, unfortunately, just does not have the capabilities of hitting Altaria as hard, as you can see right there, and that can just counter down. So kind of a misplay by me to let that Hydro Pump go, but I was still kind of able to salvage the situation. Alright, so Stunfisk in the lead definitely is a losing matchup for sure. You definitely don't want your Jirachi matchup against it. And so here's kind of a situation where the Sableye lures out the Azumarill, right? And so this is a good spot to be in because now you get rid of the Azumarill so that your Machamp can kind of have free reign. And unfortunately, my opponent actually even let the Return go through, and you can see that they were using Play Rough, so it's going to take them even longer to get to that next charge move. So I was able to actually win the matchup and flip switch advantage right there. So this is why you really want Return Sableye. Unfortunately, other variants of Sableye does not really have that same effect. And now you can see that I could realign all my counters to their to the Pokemon they're weak to, and I do shield this just because if it was an Earthquake, it would have taken me out one shot, and then Machamp with energy actually does quite a bit of damage as well to Skarmory. So they actually have to shield right here, and they have to drop their charge move, but at this point, my Jirachi, resisting that flying damage, can just kind of muscle through this one. And Doom Desire obviously is going to be resisted, but it's a very good hard-hitting neutral move or just even resistant move at times too. Alright, another Galarian Stunfisk lead loss, so I'm going to swap to Sableye right here. So the tricky thing is if they have every counter lined up for your Pokemon, then it can definitely be very hard to still win. And so as you can see, my opponent right here does recognize the potential of Return, so I am going to just let the Ice Beam go because I know that it's much harder to flip this matchup if they're shielding the Return. At least I'm coming out of it with energy advantage, or not energy advantage, sorry, shield advantage. And then now I'm probably going to let this go, just because even if they take out my Jirachi right there, I still want kind of shield advantage from the Machamp back. So it's actually going to be a Deoxys Defense, and Deoxys Defense is very strong against Machamp. However, Machamp still has a lot of play if you can land those Rock Slides. It's just that these counters are doing resistance damage, and because of the bulk of Deoxys Defense, it's much harder to get around. So I'm going to be able to try to muscle through this. I was able to land the bait, so that was a pretty good spot to be in. And then unfortunately they have the whole Galarian Stunfisk in the back, and in this situation they're able to kind of counter me throughout the entire way, and I couldn't really do much about it. I think only a worse situation than that would probably be like a confusion user, but other than that, it's still a pretty tough matchup, and then they can take me out here. So obviously if they have counters lined up for your entire lineup, there's certain ways you just can't play out of. But overall, if they have two things in the back that are weak to Machamp or Sableye, you definitely have a lot of play. Alright, so they actually safe swap their Azumarill into my Jirachi, mainly because Jirachi has a really great matchup against Tropius, and so this is actually a pretty good spot to be in because they're bringing out their Azumarill by themselves, which means that, you know, it's their own top counter, and then I'm going to bring in Sableye, hoping to lure out the Tropius. Actually getting this foul play off is pretty nice too, because I'm able to do some chip damage on the Galarian Stunfisk. I'm going to let this go because if they take out my Sableye, that's not a problem. Now they actually kind of put them in themselves in an awkward position because they don't have much to farm off of, and then I have two Doom Desires ready to go on against this Tropius, and they're going to shield, but even shielding, I know that I could probably flip this matchup still, because these moves are going to be resisted, and I'm going to see if I can get to another Doom Desire. Yeah, and the Air Slash just unfortunately isn't going to be able to do enough, and I'm able to take out the Tropius and then line up the Machamp against Stunfisk to quit out the match. Jirachi actually wins a lot of leads overall, so it does really great against pretty much all the grass, and so even against Meganium does have to land the Earthquake to win this matchup, but as long as you're shielding and counting the right moves, then it's fine, even if they bait you with a few Frenzy Plants. Most Meganiums usually do, but it's not really worth taking the risk of that Meganium. And the thing I really like about this lineup too is that a lot of people like to use Deoxys Defense as a safe swap, and so because of that, Sableye is probably one of the hardest counters to that safe swap, and so you're able to ensure that they can't really flip your win condition or your switch advantage in that situation if they lost their lead and trying to win it back with Deoxys Defense. And so no really need to bait right here because between Jirachi and Machamp, they pretty much have really great coverage, complementary to each other, so I don't really need to farm up too much energy there. And then I noticed that they actually went straight for Rock Slide, so definitely something to watch out for with Stunfisk is sometimes they kind of panic when they see a Shadow Machamp and they'll just throw the Rock Slide right away. But if that's the case, you just don't even need to shield it, and your Machamp will be fine. The Mudshots won't do too much damage afterward. I'm going to let that go and then just drop the Doom Desire instead. Alright, so the Shadow Victreebel, Deoxys Defense, and Bastiodon line. This is a great counter to that line. It's a perfect counter, actually. So they bring in Deoxys Defense, you bring in Sableye, they're going to bring in Bastiodon later, you bring in the Machamp. So for anyone that struggles playing against this line or just hates playing against this line in general, this is a great line that counters that. So Jirachi is going to have a lot of play against Victreebel, and then Sableye just dominates Deoxys Defense, and the Shadow Machamp also completely wrecks Bastiodon. So yeah, so really no need to even shield at this point. Going to just Confusion down and then bring in my Machamp, and then throw the Cross Chop with, you know, a 2-to-1 shield advantage. Is really not much point right here, and then I'm just going to go straight counter down. So Registeel, so because I mentioned that this video was filmed during Season 2, at the end of Season 2, this was actually before Registeel's nerf to both Flash Cannon and Pokesplash. So in this specific matchup, it's actually harder than usual, but against Registeel leads, it still definitely has some play. Okay, so I do let this Azumarill just take me out just because they do end up shielding the return. So once they shield the return, it's not really usually worth it unless you notice that they're running play rough, then you potentially still can flip that matchup, but kind of depends on how quick they were on the switches. And unfortunately in this situation, I cannot really beat the Registeel just because they have perfect counters lined up. If you have a Hypno in the back, Shadow or not Shadow, or any really Confusion users, that Machamp unfortunately is not going to be able to do too much. So in this situation, I'm just going to let these Fire Punches go, but unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see this Jirachi beat a Registeel in a head-to-head. So Registeel definitely a little bit tougher. I think in this situation, it's probably about as tough as Galarian Stunfisk for this specific lineup. But, you know, again, if they line up all their counters perfectly, there's not really much you can do. So I'm just going to let this Charge Move go. But yeah, if they have Registeel in the back, a little bit easier to deal with for sure. Alright, Alolan Marowak is actually not too bad. You would think that the Fire Spin damage would do really well against Jirachi, but the thing is, Alolan Marowak does not resist Psychic damage. It's going to take neutral, and so as long as you can land a Psychic on that Alolan Marowak, it actually does a ton of damage. And then from there, you can potentially even counter down with Machamp. So that's kind of the plan I'm realizing at this moment. I am probably going to shield this, and luckily it is a Hydro Pump, so I put myself in a pretty good spot. I can farm up a little extra and then drop the Doom Desire. And then this will allow me to get to Psychic a little bit faster before they can get to a Shadow Ball. And then so I'm going to go straight for the Psychic. And see, look at how much damage it does. Almost full health. Alolan Marowak actually takes out almost about 2/3 of its health, maybe 3/5. So it does a bunch of damage, and then the thing I love about Machamp is you can counter down so many things. So unfortunately, they're not able to get to another Shadow Ball in time. So I could farm up all this extra energy, and now I could, you know, one-shot their Shiftry essentially at this point, and then counter down. So Fire types in the lead really aren't that bad. So here's another Fire type with Charizard. Charizard is actually a very uncommon Pokemon in Go Battle League, just because there's just so much that counters it, unfortunately. And so even with a winning lead, you still have potentially a lot of play. And so those confusions will do quite a bit to Charizard, and of course the Psychic is not resisted either, so that would definitely pretty much almost one-shot Charizard. And at this point, I'm going to drop the Foul Play, hoping to potentially bait out a shield. Unfortunately, my opponent doesn't fall for it, so good on them to kind of count those moves properly. And then, as you can see, those confusions are already chunking away that Charizard's life, even though it's a great matchup overall with its typing against Jirachi. And so I'm not going to fall for the bait right here. I was anticipating that even if it was Blast Burn, I could just counter it down and store up a bunch of energy on my Machamp. And so I'm going to bring my Machamp right here because I don't really want to get my Jirachi countered down. And so I am going to shield. Unfortunately, it's a Rock Slide, but even Rock Slides at this range will definitely hurt just because Shadow Machamp is pretty frail. Luckily, I was able to bait out a shield with Cross Chop, and then now I can land the Rock Slide and take out the Deoxys Defense. Yeah, so Fire leads overall aren't too bad actually against this team, just because you have definitely some options in the back. Again, so when people swap in their Azumarill, it's a pretty good spot to be in because you're essentially getting them, you're luring them out without needing to even use the Sableye. And then Sableye is great against fighters, so I'm not too worried about that Machamp in the back. However, I can't remember if is this a Shadow Machamp or regular. I can't really remember, but I guess we'll see in a second. But Shadow Machamp still actually can be a threat to Sableye, so definitely something to watch out for. Okay, so they actually bring in their Machamp into this Jirachi, which is a little bit of a surprise. I end up bringing in my Sableye, expecting that, you know, they must be, I don't know, really weak to Sableye in the back, but they brought in Stunfisk after, so I'm actually a little bit confused on why they didn't bring in Stunfisk into my Jirachi. So this actually puts me in a bad situation because one Cross Chop will almost one-shot another Shadow Machamp, and I know that they're going to get to their Cross Chop before me, so what I had to do is go for a Sack Swap, and luckily I was able to time it and get the Sack Swap right here with Jirachi, and then now I could land my own Cross Chop. Yeah, so had I not done that, then I probably would have lost the match. So in that situation, maybe it was better for me to not switch to Sableye, just so that I could kind of match up Sableye right away with their Galarian Stunfisk. Alright, Toxicroak lead. Obviously a very strong matchup for Jirachi, being kind of 4 times weak to Confusion is going to do a bunch of damage. And the thing you do have to watch out for is the Mud Bombs from Toxicroak actually do a lot of damage to Jirachi, so that's actually going to be potentially a problem if I don't have Shield up and ready. So they actually brought in Sableye, and so Sableye is actually one of the hardest things for this team to deal with, just because, especially in the lead, unfortunately, in the back, it's doable to a degree, but in the lead, you definitely have some issues. So it's kind of an interesting scenario we have going on right here, because we're both using our Sableye to counter each other's fighters. But yeah, so it does create for some interesting matchups right here. And then luckily I was able to get to a foul play and burn that last shield. And then I think they CMP tied right there, which is unfortunate, because and I think they undercharged us so I can get some extra energy, and then I could go straight for the rock slide right here and take out the Sableye. Okay, Altaria is not nearly as common in Season 3, but I have been seeing an uptick of Altaria recently. Altaria also, again, a great matchup for Jirachi right off the bat, but that Dragon Breath damage does start adding up. So if they're shielding a lot, you might have to match their shields. A great swap by them to catch the Doom Desire, but now I can go in straight with the Machamp and counter down. And I do shield right here because I didn't want to be hit by Earthquake. And then now I have a Rock Slide ready. This Rock Slide, as you saw before, is going to do a ton of damage to Altaria. Unfortunately, it's actually a Azumarill. So it does make things a little bit tricky, just because that Sableye doesn't have a great matchup against Altaria either. So I'm going to have to come in and kind of do a lot of work with this Sableye against Azumarill. And I'm just going to go straight for the foul play. And I think my rationale right here is whatever they throw at me after this, even if I get taken out, I can at least just confusion down. So expecting that I potentially could still lose that matchup, as long as I was in a range where I can get some extra energy, that was fine with me. Or potentially bait out shield, but getting to 2 Doom Desires right here, I can finish off this Altaria. So definitely a little bit closer. Oh, I forgot the Azumarill still alive too. Skarmory lead. So Skarmory, the other flyer that you mainly see, you see a lot of it in Season 3. Jirachi does okay against it. It's resisted matchups across the board on both sides. However, because of how hard Doom Desire hits, you usually can come out with a win there. Pending any, I don't know, lag or some other issues going on. Even with Brave Bird, you definitely want to consider shielding, but in this case it was before Brave Bird came out, so I knew that I could survive it. Okay, so Stunfisk comes out. At this point, it's not really worth switching out because I'm pretty much almost fainted out. I'm going to bring in the Machamp, just go straight counter down. Surprisingly, they didn't swap out right away, so it's making me think that they're potentially weak to Machamp, or they just want to kind of draw a shield. So I am going to drop the Rock Slide right there, and then at this point I realize it's probably not play rough, so I'm going to let this move go. It could be Ice Beam, and so Ice Beam is a pretty good spot for Sableye to be in, because you can still do a bunch of damage in between the 2 Ice Beams that they throw at you. So able to bait out, I think, both of their shields at this point. So now I could pretty much just counter down this Azumarill and then have the Cross Chop ready, or almost Cross Chop ready for the Stunfisk. Yeah, so Machamp doing resisted counter damage is actually a really great way to farm in this matchup with Azumarill, but as well as a lot of flyers too. Alright, so my original Double Grass Skarmory line. This team is actually a very strong counter to that. So Machamp right here, you can just straight counter down the Shiftry. If you are a little bit slow, which I am in this specific situation, they can get to 2 Leaf Blades usually. However, if you're quick on your switch, you could usually take them out before they get to the second one. So you could tank one as long as you have a decently ranked Machamp. I haven't looked too much into it. Mine's ranked in like the 200s for PvP IVs. Luckily, we were able to CMP tie right there, so that's pretty huge. And then at this point, I'm going to bring Sableye. I'm kind of anticipating it being a Meganium in the back, so I want to save my Jirachi for it because that's a much better matchup against Meganium than Sableye does. And the Sableye can do pretty well against Skarmory too. So they shield the Skarmory. I don't know if that's the best play right there, but either way, I think they're in a very tough matchup against Jirachi. But Skarmory doesn't really have too much play against the rest of this line too. So I'm going to shield this, and then they're probably within confusion range at this point. Or I'm just going to do this out just to be safe. So if you run into any Skarmory double grass lines, this line is a pretty solid counter to it. So Shiftry in the lead is actually a really tough matchup. I think this is probably one of the few, if not the only one I actually was able to pull off. And the big reason is because Shiftry has a great matchup against your Safe Swap and Sableye as well. And so potentially they could stay in, or they could damage you and then really ensure they win switch advantage by dropping the Leaf Blade. So really smart by my opponent not to shield there, because this ensures that I can't really farm that much with my Jirachi. And so what I'm trying to do right here is hopefully land a Doom Desire or force a shield on the Shiftry, and then quickly swap straight away to the Machamp. And so Machamp is obviously very effective, but then they have Toxicroak in the back. And so Toxicroak, unfortunately, is going to resist all of this fighting damage, and so they are going to shield right there. But this second Cross Chop is not going to be enough, and then Rock Slide is also obviously resisted. And so I am going to have to shield this because this Mud Bomb is going to do quite a bit of damage. And the big thing here is I need to land a Doom Desire. And so my only win condition I notice here is I need to just not shield the Leaf Blade and hope that they're going for a bait. Obviously, if they went for a foul play, I would have been done for. But because they went for the bait, they would have to land a second charge move and able to win that by a small margin. So Hypno lead is actually not too bad for Jirachi, and it's okay for my lineups to go against in the lead, because you're really saving the Machamp a really bad matchup down the road. And even if it's Shadow Hypno, the main thing is yeah, this Muck is going to be kind of a problem just because it's going to be strong against my Sableye. But they bring in the Azu, so Azu against Machamp and Sableye probably isn't the best matchup, but both of these excel quite a bit when they have a little bit of energy. And so I'm going to let this Hydro Pump go because I knew that I could survive any charge move even though it's play rough with a sliver of health. And so now I have a shield for my Machamp, and then I can shield this move and then charge up a little extra energy, and then drop it on the Muck. They actually decided to swap out, so that's not too bad for me because now I can still get to a Rock Slide in time for this Azu. But yeah, so Hypno in the lead is not a big deal usually, even if they're running Fire Punch. The main reason is whether it's Shadow or not Shadow variant, the Fire Punch is not going to be enough to take out Jirachi, so they're going to have to drop another one anyway. So don't let the Shadow Hypnos scare you off. They will be kind of pretty much an equal threat as a regular one. Deoxys Defense is kind of a tricky one. You don't really want to give away switch advantage right off the bat. So what I'm going to do here instead is just lose on purpose and then bring in my Sableye and just farm up energy. So they bring in their own Sableye, and like I said, Sableye is kind of an issue for this team. So luckily I had an energy advantage, and now we're on even shields, but I was thinking about farming down, but I didn't want to play it too risky because I knew there were probably only one Shadow Claw behind me. So I didn't want to have to potentially force another shield. So they bring in Ferrothorn, and this is an okay matchup. These foul plays definitely do hurt, and then I quickly bring in my Machamp, and so I actually let my Machamp go right here, or I tried to. They actually end up throwing a charge move right here, which is pretty good for me. Mainly because Sableye with that shield advantage can still threaten Ferrothorn quite a bit, and I knew that Sableye would obviously have a better matchup against Deoxys Defense down the road too. So that's why I decided to save for Sableye, and then charge up to 2 foul plays and drop the second one right here to beat out my opponent. Alright, so the famous Asian Milkman line with Dewgong, Munchlax, and Medicham. I actually make a big mistake here. What I should have done is swapped to Machamp. I think the reason why I did swap to Sableye though is that Sableye has an okay advantage, I guess, against this team if they don't land the Bulldoze, but they unfortunately actually do land a Bulldoze. However, I know that my Machamp is going to have decent play against Dewgong, and Medicham has a bad matchup against Jirachi anyway, so either way, I knew that this Dewgong was kind of going to be dead weight for my opponent. Had I had maybe Sableye in the back, it'd have some play right there. Obviously, Sableye is a little bit better for Medicham, so I probably should have thought about that when I switched. I really have no clue why I actually swapped Sableye, but even with that misplay by me, it's actually not that big of a deal. Alright, opponent's going to use Psychic, and I'm just going to just Confusion down. So yeah, I assume they weren't running Dynamic Punch on their Machamp. Alright, Regular Stunfisk, how do you handle this? You don't see too many of these days, to be honest, and overall I think they're much easier to deal with than the Galarian Stunfisk, because your Jirachi still can land Psychics on it, and then that return did a ton of damage. And I'm going to just let this go because this Jirachi can just Confusion down the Toxicroak. And then I know that the Stunfisk is really low on health too, so it's only a few counters away. And they couldn't even get off a Mud Bomb, so that's a good spot to be in. I am going to drop the Doom Desire. Even at this range, I should be able to take it out. And then I quickly go for a swap to my Machamp. I guess either way I had to shield, but at least now I get 2 counters worth of extra energy. And then against Skarmory with a slight energy lead, and obviously with the Jirachi in the back, this is a pretty easy matchup to clean up. I think Rock Slide is better than Cross Chop if you can get to it, but I was hoping to get to another Cross Chop. Unfortunately, I couldn't. Either way, it was going to be fine at this point, just because the advantage I have. Yep, and Sky Attack is going to be resisted still, and just Confusion down. Alright, Umbreon lead is probably also one of the hardest leads to go into, mainly because Sableye, again, kind of like Shiftry, is not a great safe swap into Umbreon. And so my opponent here is actually staying in, so I let this Foul Play go knowing that I could get to the return still, and then so I'm going to drop this return and then bring in my Machamp. However, the issue is my switch clock is still not fully up yet, so they potentially could lock me into this bad matchup. And so they do briefly, but it's not terrible because I'm going to drop the Rock Slide, force a shield, and then bring in my Jirachi. However, what I'm anticipating right here is my opponent is actually pivoting, and they are bringing in their Mantine, knowing that their Umbreon could take out my Jirachi, and then they have Machamp counter in the back still. So that's probably the smartest play on their end, and then they could almost pretty much like snarl me down at this point, and Shadow Machamp doesn't want to take a Last Resort either. And as you can see, it's going to be Shadow Hypno, and nothing you can do here. So unfortunate, but that's going to be the case. And yeah, that's going to be that match. So that's pretty much the team that I was using at the end of last season. I didn't have any Abomasnow matchups just because it was before it got Weather Ball, but Jirachi in the lead and Machamp in the back have a lot of play against Abomasnow, so that's not really an issue with this team in my opinion. So feel free to give this team a try, especially in Season 3. Hopefully it works well for you. It is a lot of fun to play, but it does take a little bit of finesse on drawing out the Azus and the Flyers. A big thank you to all my patrons who've been supporting my content creation. Even if you're not a part of the Patreon and would still like to be a part of my Discord, feel free to join that. I'll put the link in the description below. There's a lot of channels for people that aren't patrons to chat in. Thank you all for watching. Feel free to give this video a like and share. Subscribe for future content. Hit that notification bell to get alerted right when I drop a new video. And I'll see y'all next time.